You are tagged. You're it. Bad joke. And let me get back over to Zoom so I can see you.
Okay.
So hello, friends. I appreciate everybody tuning in here. I'm going to get things set up so I can monitor two different feeds in case we have any questions. One would be right here on Zoom, where there's a chat box, and then of course on Facebook, where I can monitor. And yes, sir. Okay, we're live. Perfect. Great. So I'll keep an eye on this. Yeah, man, I've been really excited about this because, well, I mean, I'm going to introduce my guest first, and then I'll tell a little bit. The gentleman joining me right now is somebody I've been following for, it's close to 40 years. It was before Pat Metheny when I lived in Chicago. We can talk about that in a minute. But he is an astoundingly amazing musician, an educator, a drummer, recording artist. It's such an honor to have you here. So I want to introduce my guest, Paul Wertico. How you doing, man?
Good, Carl. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webcast. It's great to do these because, what else is better than talking about things we love,
Exactly. I feel the same way. Yeah, so, it's interesting. I moved to Evanston in early March, like very early March of 1982. And I quickly got into this. I'd been out there a couple times and, checking things out, maybe thought about going to school, which I didn't do. But I remember seeing you, and we were talking about this the other night. I can't remember the name of the place or the band, but I remember you were there pre-Metheny days and in a club, North Lincoln area, I think. And it was so cool because at the time I'm 20 years old, almost 21. And my mind is blown by the talent. The big cities, there's a lot of, back in the day, there were a lot of clubs. You could see a lot of great players, and you're one of the people I saw, and it was so cool. It was just so cool. You're originally from the Chicago area too, right?
Yeah. Born in Chicago,
Now, if we move to present day, just off topic here, how you doing? Everything okay? This pandemic and COVID, you're healthy, your family too?
Yeah. I mean, I almost feel guilty in saying that everything is really fine.
Yeah.
We've stayed healthy. Luckily, we've been able to keep our work. I mean, obviously, I'm not touring at this particular time, but, I'm a tenured professor at Roosevelt University, at the Chicago College of Performing Arts. And
Yeah.
so I'm teaching all my classes remote, which I really like. I a lot of times I'll say that it's teaching remote is almost like recording as opposed to teaching live in the classroom is like a live gig, because everything, when you teach remote, everything is recorded. So you can go back, you could, see how you're doing, how you're presenting the material. And then if students, for some reason miss out, they can always go back and watch a class that they missed. So it's been really good. And I've always really loved technology. So I really kind of enjoy trying to stay up to date on everything.
Yeah. It's interesting how the pandemic has brought about new ways of getting creative and doing things. When I was plunged into doing online training last March, I had never done any, and
Oh, wow.
working with, yeah, I had never done any kind of training, like teaching people how to walk, because I do a lot in the movement disorder arena and learning disabilities. But you know what? I'm not happy about the pandemic, but I'm happy about the opportunity to be able to offer in a different way, how I can help people. So
Right.
it's in the schools have adapted very quickly. I mean, what options are there? You adapt or you shut down. So you adapt.
Right.
Yeah, it's
And,
cool.
the president of the university, Ali Malekzadeh, I mean, he's just really a good guy. I mean, it's teaching there is like where we all know each other. There's some universities where people teach and the president doesn't know who is in the faculty or anything. And that's not like that at our school. And so he quickly made the decision that, you know, there would be like 15% classes live. I mean, there's some classes where you have to be there, but everything went remote. So we knew that right away, you know, because I know some other schools were kind of like vacillating back and forth. And then, you know, so they'd open and then they'd have to close, which caused a lot of confusion. But luckily, you know, at Roosevelt, we didn't have to deal with that. So it was really good decision making.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So did your semester start already out there?
Yeah, we just finished our second week. You know? Okay. Yeah, I mean, right after this, I'm on the strategic planning committee. So when we're done with this, I'll be doing that. And I had an 8 o'clock faculty meeting this morning. So, you know, there's all that stuff, you know, that like as a musician, you know, you go to the gig, you go to the sound check, you catch the plane or whatever. But this is like a whole other world, which I really love. I love being involved in the decision making and stuff too, as opposed to just teaching.
That's good. That's really good. So how long have you been working with Roosevelt? How long have you been teaching?
Going on like 19 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, man. So, you know, what I was thinking is, if you don't mind, maybe we could go through a brief chronological timeline, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just kind of talk a little bit about, you know, how did you get started in music and drums and anything else having to do with this? And then, you know, I saw you in clubs in Chicago when I was there, and then there's Pat Metheny, and then there's all the other stuff that you've done that some I knew, but there's a lot I didn't know. And I'd love to, you know, along the way, maybe stop and ask some specific questions too. But where did it all begin for you?
Sure. Like, I mean, I guess I should start out by saying I did not have a master plan. You know, it wasn't like I was going to end up following this thing with a direct line. And if I did this, I'm going to get there. I mean, how it kind of worked out was right when I started 6th grade, my parents and I moved out to Cary, Illinois. And my mom one day said, oh, you know, there's a band, you should take up an instrument. Just don't take up the drums. But I had already been listening and tapping along with the AM radio and all that stuff. So I joined the school band, and the band director, Vern Pade, he was a saxophone player and really great teacher, you know. So he taught me how to hold the drumsticks and how to read the music and all that kind of stuff. And then I just could do it. It was weird. So all my friends, you know, so they had been playing since they were 8, and here I am, I'm 12. And then all of a sudden I'm the soloist in the concert band and all that. And then one thing led to another where, you know, I sat down at a friend's drum kit. I didn't even have a drum kit at this point, and I could just play it, you know, and it was weird. And then I got, as a graduation present, 8th grade, I got a drum set. And, so, you know, I started practicing along with an AM radio behind my head. I would play along with like the Hollies and, you know, whatever was on, the Beatles, but I would play kind of free, but then also in time. You know, I have always heard, you know, time is not necessarily always inorganic. I hear it more organic. So it's more like breathing. And then I went to high school and had a great high school band director. I mean, we're still friends to this day. I even dedicated my book to him, named Donald Ahrensberger. And he really wanted me to join the band. And I wasn't like, you know, I was into chemistry and into sports and everything. And so when I finally auditioned for the band, I didn't, you know, practice the material or anything. And I kind of came in 8th on the audition where the concert band had 5 chairs. So he expanded it to 8 chairs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
That's
then
cool.
And so he would let me do these, you know, he'd let me solo like on, or even improvise on symphonies. Go, I like what you're playing more. You know, he let my creative juices just kind of go wild. And
That's
so
great.
one thing led to another where, you know, the band went on tour and we went to some high schools and, you know, we went to some colleges. And next thing I know, I have a scholarship at Western Illinois when Gary Chafee was teaching there, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and at one point, you know, I asked my mom, I said, you know, I'd like to take drum set lessons. And she goes, no. because just do what you're doing, which really turned out great. Because, music always made sense to me. Like I have really good memory and I've got really great pitch. So I could hear something and everything, like even that article I told you to read, the Not So Modern Drummer, where they're comparing me to Jackson Pollock, where shapes that necessarily aren't normal shapes, your brain can make them into something that makes sense to you. And music was like that. So having, I guess, that ability, and I also have really fast reflexes. I remember, when you're taking driving lessons, they tested everyone's reflexes. And like mine was so much more faster than everyone else in the class. It was weird. I don't know why, but I was the only, I'm really the only musician in the family. And just one thing kind of led to the next. I mean, I can stop there if you want to stop at that particular point before I start talking about how I broke into the scene. But any questions on that?
Let's see. Well, first of all, we have a message from, maybe you know this person, Pino Zapulo.
Okay, yeah. How you doing, Pino?
Pino says, hi, Paul. So we have a few people watching here. Let's see. Well, reflexes and shapes. And
right.
It immediately starts me thinking, and here I go again showing this book, but I love this book. So the work that I do, music has been very, very beneficial in helping people in so many ways, whether it's anxiety reduction, helping them out of depression a little bit, or a rhythmic something, helping them to walk better if they have a movement disorder. So this book here is my favorite because it's all research based. It's all written by a bunch of doctors. Every chapter is written by a different team of doctors. And I'm not necessarily always into the research stuff, although I appreciate it. But this goes into talking about things that really have to do with the wiring of the brain. And, we're all wired up in our own unique ways.
Right.
So the article that you had me read, which I appreciate you sending very much in the comparison to Jackson Pollock, is this whole thing about, and I hear it in that article explained a lot to me. Oh, there's a lot to learn though about why you play the way you do, which I love, because when you say the word shapes, I get it. Like you're playing almost like, if I could make an analogy, you're playing in 3 dimensions. This is not just playing notes and stuff, or even with feeling. It goes beyond feeling and emotions. It goes into like dimensions. And at some point though, I do have a question, and I hope you take it as a compliment, because I mean it as a compliment. Was Elvin Jones an influence to you?
Oh, totally.
Because I have to tell you now, please stay with me on this, because I've talked about this with many people. We are our influences to some degree.
Right.
We may pull more from some people than others, but while you have established your unique, distinct voice as a musician, I also hear, the first person I hear is Elvin, but you make it your own. And I love that.
Thanks.
Love that.
Well, I was lucky that, I bought so many records. There would be these like sort of department stores that would have blowout sales on, mono Atlantic records and things. So I bought everything I could. So both jazz, rock, and ethnic. And it's funny you should mention Elvin, because the very first day of college, I missed, because I went to the jazz showcase when it was at the North Park Hotel.
Joe Siegel's?
Yeah. And it was a Sunday afternoon. So school started on a Monday, and it was Elvin Jones, with Gene Pearl on bass, and Dave Liebman and Joe Farrell on sax.
Farrell, holy crap.
And so, I went there with my girlfriend, and we were like in the first row, right? Well, how long do you think that concert was? Take a guess.
It wasn't an hour set. If anything, it was probably hours.
It was 6 hours.
Oh, wow, man.
That's why I couldn't drive, because the drive was going to be 5 hours, So by the time they finished, it was already like midnight, And I remember into the 5th hour, Elvin looked at my girlfriend at the time and like kind of smiled at her, smiled at me, and gave her a drumstick just for hanging in there that long,
So wait a minute. We got to talk a technical detail here. So what year was that, first of all, approximately?
That would have been 1971.
So was Joe Siegel's still at that same location in, let's say, 82? Well, didn't they moved at some point?
Okay, so Joe Siegel started the Jazz Showcase at Roosevelt University, right? Okay.
No, I didn't know that. Really?
That's where he started it. So he had Miles Davis and Charlie Parker play at Roosevelt when he was a student.
So that's interesting, because the Joe Siegel's, the showcase I went to in 82 and 83 when I lived out there, anytime I went to a show, it's really lucky. I had a front row seat.
Yeah.
And so if you have front row at the showcase, you're like, I remember being in front of Dexter Gordon where I could really literally reach out and touch his shoe.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, the guy's like 6'4" or 5.
Yeah.
And, he's up on a stage that's 2 or 3 feet. And I'm looking at this giant up there, and the bell of his horn is just above my head. Eddie Gladden played the most beautiful drum solo.
Oh, my gosh.
Brush solo I've ever heard.
Oh, Eddie Gladden was great. Well, I mean, if it would have been 82 or something, probably would have been at the Happy Medium on Rush Street.
It was an upstairs of a building, I think.
It was upstairs? Well, then it might have been the Brown Shoe on Wells.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know who would know. I could ask my friend Tom.
Because I know
that it matters.
Just from my experience, in the 70s, it started out, at the North Park Hotel. Mm-hmm. And then it did go to the Happy Medium. That was the basement on Rush Street. And then it went to the Brown Shoe at Wells. Then it went to, I think, the Blackstone Hotel. And then it went to a Grand and State. And now it's like in the Dearborn Street building. So, I mean, there's been many, many locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but
if it was upstairs, it would have probably, at that time, it probably would have been the Brown Shoe.
Okay. Could be. But I'll tell you, it was I saw Max there. I saw Dexter. I saw a bunch of people. So let's go back, though. So you missed the first day of college because you were watching Elvin Jones, man.
Right, right.
Is so cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw so many people there, even in the 70s. Like Roy Haynes is another main influence for me. I saw him play. Back then, you could see all these guys like Art Blakey and Max Roach and, Mickey Roker, Tony Williams. It was amazing to be able to go, and it wasn't that expensive. But it was funny because, to go back to Cary, Illinois, there was a club called Harry Hope's, where that's the first time I actually saw Pat Metheny's band. And there was like this ski resort that was outside of, Cary, between like Cary and Algonquin. And that's where you could go. And I could be like 15, 16, and you'd go and pay $3 and you'd see, I remember seeing the Who play where they blew out the power 7 times.
Oh my gosh.
So there were 7 Keith Moon drum solos.
Wow, man.
And I think Steppenwolf and the Rotary Connection opened for them. So, I mean, for like $3, you get to see these kind of bands.
Wow.
So, it was an amazing time, and then you had the Kinetic Playground, which was on Clark, where, I just saw a recent poster where you had Vanilla Fudge, Led Zeppelin, and Jethro Tull all in one night. I mean, imagine that, just going to see those kind of bands. So yeah, now things have completely changed in so many ways, because I teach a lot of courses, even to non-music majors, on the history of the blues, history of rock, history of Black American music generally, history of jazz. I teach a social justice through sound class. And it's really fascinating to see why things changed the way they changed. So for instance, really not until like Led Zeppelin got big and were too big to play clubs anymore, and even auditoriums. I mean, because Roosevelt's got the auditorium theater, and I remember seeing, Frank Zappa there when Ainsley Dunbar just joined and all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
But it got to the point where Led Zeppelin started playing more like, arenas. And then, that kind of took off. And so bands just got bigger and bigger. So now you need, like, unless you're, on the guest list, you need a set of binoculars. I mean, I literally was probably 5 feet from Keith Moon, and they still destroyed their equipment at the end, even though even though it was like only probably 300 people, it was packed, And I remember after Pete Townsend destroyed his guitar, it fell in front of me, and one of their techs like jumped off the stage and almost, knocked me over to get the piece of guitar. But, so for me, I'm kind of a combination of all, like, I think of Keith Moon as like one of my favorite drummers, him and Ginger and Mitch, like John Bonham, I loved, but he wouldn't be the main. I mean, I loved Paul Whaley from Blue Cheer, that's, I was into all like these different, and Robert Wyatt from the Soft Machine, Michael Giles from King Crimson, I liked those bands. And then jazz wise, I went all the way back to Baby Dodds, I had like the 10-inch talking and drum solos record. So, I'd get on the train and I'd go downtown to Rose Records, and on the second floor, they would blow out records, for nothing again. So I bought as many as I could and take them home. And I didn't even know who these people were half the time. I bought like Idris Muhammad's Black Rhythm Revolution. I didn't know who he was, but that's like one of my favorite records. Or, Han Benink, who's Han Benink? Dad became famous.
But it cost $1 or maybe $2.
Yeah, maybe even less. I mean, some of the stuff at Goldblatt's, when they were blowing out like Atlantic records, they might be like 23 cents, Yeah. So, so that's, and I was just, a voracious reader and listener. And so, not only did music make sense to me, but also, I really knew a lot of songs. I knew a lot of styles because, right around that time, I was taking the train in to Chicago, and I went to the Marina Towers. They had this jam session with Barrett Deems, the great drummer. Who Barrett Deems was? Barrett Deems, world's fastest drummer, And he
actually, I have a friend of mine who used to work with him. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I sat in, and then he liked my playing. So he'd get me on all these gigs as a sub for him. And even when his wife, Jane, asked me to take over the big band, but I couldn't do it. I was too busy. Yeah. But I mean, for me, because I see someone's asking me about some of the teachers I studied with. Well, I really didn't, I mean, when I was at college at Western Illinois, Gary Chafee was there. So he would have been one of my first teachers, but that was it. I mean, like I got together with Freddie Gruber one time, and, it was after the jazz festival, and I sat with him and he showed me some stuff, but he just said, "You're fine." Roy Knapp came to see me play.
Oh yeah.
And I sat with him. I wanted to study. He said, "Man, no, you're fine." He said, what do you think of your left hand? I said, "I don't know." He goes, "It's fantastic." So I'm really, it's weird that I teach, because I was teaching like at 3 music stores when I was 15. My dad had to drive me to these different cities to teach,
That's great. Yeah.
And it was like a real natural thing. It was so strange. But the way I learned was listening. And, this is before videos, obviously, but I'd go hear people live and I'd talk and make friends with them, hang out with them. So it was a real organic thing. And in a lot of ways, that's what's missing sometimes, especially in jazz, for instance. I mean, because now, a lot of kids go to study at colleges, which is great, because I mean, then you get a well-rounded background, you get a degree. But a lot of the jazz things, the way jazz starts, it was a community, it was a cultural experience too.
Yeah.
So one thing about teaching in Chicago is that the students can go out and go to clubs and hang out with musicians too. It's not like being somewhere in the middle of nowhere, where you're just going to school and you're trying to learn from your teachers only, but to go to a jam session, you'd have to drive 7 hours somewhere, Now, I'm not putting that down, but I'm just saying, jazz is a real urban kind of music. It really comes from just the sound of the city in a lot of ways. I mean, even the drum beat itself, it comes from the clickety clack of rails, the old steam engines. I mean, so a lot of that stuff comes from somewhere, and then musicians kind of adapt to it, and they make it into a new kind of music.
I wonder if that's why I like trains.
I'm sure it is.
Well,
Trains have a direction,
mhm,
there's
yeah.
power, especially like steam locomotives, because steam locomotives are like a living thing. They
Mhm.
breathe, they pee, you know,
They do, yeah.
they hiss, they do all those things, it's like, and the power behind it, and just the direction of it too, for drummers, especially. Like, I know a lot of drummers that really are into trains and railroads because of that motion and that feeling of propulsion, and that's what we try to do with music.
It's interesting. I never made that correlation before. By the way, my mom is watching.
Hi,
Hey,
Mom.
mom. Mom is Helen. Helen, my mom's name is. Thanks for
Hi,
joining
Helen.
me again, mom. Um, I'm talking, mom, with Paul Wertico, who's one of my favorite musicians, and I've seen him quite a few times with Pat Metheny. I know you know who Pat Metheny is. So it's interesting, mom. We have to talk about this. I think Dad has a little train set
Oh,
that he passed away. It's gonna be 5 years. I can't believe it. But yeah, he had train collectors, model train stuff. I mean, that's a big
I've got
thing.
a huge model railroad.
Do
I've
you
got like
really?
26 switches. It's Lionel command control.
Whoa!
And the way I
Hold
designed it,
on.
it's not even, I designed it so that you can have 3 trains run simultaneously and they never follow the same path.
Oh,
And
wow.
I called it Taliaville after my daughter Talia. So
That's
yeah.
so
So
cool.
if you look at the record, Don't Be Scared Anymore, there's pictures of some of it a little bit. And that's the whole idea with the trains.
Now that's really interesting. Yeah, I like trains. So in my travels around the world teaching the course, I actually always thought I'd be a traveling, performing
Mm.
musician. I did around the States some, but it's mostly in Northeast or even more local than that. But my travel actually came a few years ago, about it'd be 6 years ago this year, going international with the course that I teach, that I wrote. But um, so I'm usually on planes, and that's okay. I actually love to fly, but
Mm.
only for like 20 minutes, and then I'm ready to get off. Unless, oh, you've traveled a lot, man.
Well, I
I'll
could
tell
tell you
you.
some plane stories if you want to.
Oh, we should get to that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times instead of taking a plane to New York City or driving, because I actually don't even like to drive anymore,
Mm.
I would take a train,
Yeah.
hop on Amtrak, leg room. But I get to there's like a rhythmic thing going on in there with the train, and then take the train to Chicago a couple of years ago to teach my course. I could have flown, but I
Yeah.
took 11 hours, 12 hours, took a train because it felt good, and I like to be on a train. In fact, I live on a river, but about a quarter mile down is a train track, and it's not passenger; it's all freight. But you know when it's coming.
Oh, yeah.
You hear it in a quarter mile away. It still a little bit shakes the house, and I love
Right.
that. Been
Right.
here 28 years this year, so it's kind of interesting that correlation between direction, rhythm, and drums and
And
trains.
it's sort of sad because the clickety clack is not there the same way anymore, because the length between rails used to be much shorter. Now,
Mm-hmm.
like, you have these, like, it's almost like a quarter-mile long rails, so that you don't get that, because where you get the clack, the clickety clack is from the break between rails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, so that's not really there as much anymore. And then you don't have the side rods pumping the steam
Oh,
engine anymore. You've just got like a diesel. I mean, when you drive a train, it's almost like driving a big truck. You've got, like, you know 2,000 or 6,000 horsepower underneath your hands,
oh
which feels amazing. But I've been in many steam locomotives too. I've even stoked the coal and all that. And there's something about that that's really, it's incredible. It's also very, it's not scary. I don't get scared, but you know, there's a book called Scalded to Death by the Steam. And it's a book of railroad disasters that I bought back in 1983, right on a break on a gig on Michigan Avenue. And it talks about, like, a lot of times when people were in train wrecks, like, the engineers would get crushed by the tender, and then the pipes would break, and they'd be stuck, and they'd literally be like boiling. That's like, that was like there was their death, which was horrible. And sometimes they'd live, I mean, you can't imagine. But I remember one time being, in a steam locomotive where the engineer just, opened up the firebox, and he had a can, and he goes, watch this. And he throws the can in the fire, and you don't hear it hit because it dissolves before it even hit the bottom.
And so, I mean, how many degrees are they running there?
I mean, well, if you think, I mean, steam is hotter than water,
Right.
So you've got this really hot fire going, and then you've got the steam pressure going. So it really gets up there, and that's what gives it all the power. But it's also, when you're next to it, you can really feel it, and it's loud. It's so loud, because like when a bus goes by or a truck and they hit the steam brake, the air brake, and hurts your ear. Imagine that, like just sitting in an engine
all the time.
It got that going all the time. Yeah.
So while we're talking about trains, the other night when we were talking, you were saying you've driven trains.
Yeah.
Not just been in, the engine, but you've driven them.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I mean,
and what have you driven? Like what types of trains?
A couple. I mean, one of the funniest times, and one of the first times I drove a train, I was with that Polish rock band SBB. And we had a day off. It was like somewhere, forgot the country, because it might have changed. We were in, I think, Yugoslavia, but it was, it was changing by that time. And on a day off, we went to this really beautiful like site that had like these great, kind of mountain monuments and everything. So when we were done, we're going to go back to the city, and I see some railroad tracks, and I say, wow, where are those going? They go, well, that goes back to the city we're staying in. I went, okay, cool. And a passenger train comes in. So we're right there. And I always ask, I always tell people, you can just ask, all people can say is no. So I asked my drum tech, who spoke that language, even though he was Polish, he spoke the language, if I could ride up front with the engineer. And at first the guy went, no. And then, my tech told him who I was and who I was playing with. So the guy went, okay. So my tech and I go in on this engine. Now, this is a passenger train going through the mountains. So I'm up front, and I'm speaking with the engineer through the translator, and the engineer finally, after 20 minutes, realized I know a lot about trains. And he kind of looks at me and goes, and I went, so I drove that train through the mountains, a passenger train through the mountains, making the stops at like stations and stuff, And
That's
then later,
cool.
It was incredible. And then later on, I mean, because I've driven up the front of the TGV in France. I mean, I rode up there. I didn't drive it. And as far as the ice train in Germany and stuff. But then I also have a friend with the band Wertico, Kane and Gray, a friend of Larry Gray's a great bass player, a great teacher. Yeah. So one of his students, his dad worked at a railroad and at a steel mill, and also at a museum. So we became friends. So he would let me drive the train, and it was,
that's great, man.
Yeah, it was incredible, So like the pictures that you see, like even on my Facebook, that's real, I'm like, it's not just me sitting at some museum. And then, flying planes, I've gotten a chance to do that too, even though I don't have a pilot's license,
Yeah. Well,
that was a trip. I have to tell you that too,
You should. By the way, Michael, our friend Mike in Montreal.
Yeah, right. At Montreal too.
Paul drove a steam engine in Montreal too.
Yeah, right.
Wow, man.
Because Mike, Lyle and I went to the train museum in Montreal, on a day off, because Mike was a fan and we became good friends. And I'll just never forget, like we had the run of the place. And that was just, so cool. Yeah, I mean, it was just fascinating because Lyle was in the trains too, maybe not as much as me because, I've always loved them. I mean, I've got books galore, DVDs galore, and
that's cool.
And so whenever I can, I always, and I've, like I said, I've ridden up front with the engineers too, which is really fascinating. I mean, there's just something being there and just watching everybody do their thing, and you got to be really careful. because it gave me a different appreciation of trains too, because you know when people think of musicians, oh, we're on stage, how easy is that? Oh, that's great, I wish I could do that. And then they realized, you know, how hard travel can be, and hotels and sound checks. So I was on one of, you know, the South Shore, and I started really realizing that, you know, their shifts were 12 hours. So, you know, you're 12 hours on, which is a long time. So like when you're sitting there, you can be, you know, in the cab with the engineer and everything's going fine. And then they get a red signal, you know, so they have to wait for another train to pass by. And you can literally sit there, not only an hour, you can literally sit there 8 hours. You could literally sit there the entire shift. And during that time, they are not allowed to be on their phone. They're not even allowed to read a book. They have to just sit there for all those hours and watch the signal.
No kidding. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is a hard job. This is completely different than just going and going choo choo and pulling the whistle, you know.
That's fascinating. I two experiences I've had flying that were very very unique is my friend Stuart, who's a pilot. It's like 20 something years ago. He was flying one of those turboprop Beechcraft. It's not a jet, but it's like almost a jet, a private plane owned by a company. And he and I were in a band together because he's a great guitarist. And he played a lot with Lou Reed back in the 70s. So anyways, he says, come on, meet me over at the hangar. So I go over there, and I got like two people, I think, were taken from Syracuse to Philly, which took like 48 minutes to get there, right? Turboprop going 500 knots or whatever. On the way back, we were empty, and so I'm in the co-pilot seat, and he let me take the wheel. And I tell you, man, you just move just like this a little, and you go whoop. You're banking a curve. You go push in. You're diving. You pull up just it seems like a half an inch, and you're going whoop.
Yeah.
It was so sensitive. I couldn't believe it. And I was also in the cockpit of an F-16 fighter jet in Texas. Now, I didn't fly in it, but first of all, I don't know how tall are you?
5'9", 5'10".
Okay. You probably be okay in there, but at 6'2", I was not okay in that because they're not made for people 6'2". They're made for, but that's even more sensitive, they tell me. And then my wife was a pilot too. She doesn't have her license anymore, but it was just the little Cessnas and that. And I got to take the wheel all the time. But it's really cool. Flying is a really interesting thing to me. And as a passenger, you know, when I went from here to Singapore or Dubai, half an hour, I'm ready to get off. But then you have like 16 hours left or 23 hours left. I don't want to fly for that long. But flight is really cool. So do you enjoy flying?
I do, you know, and I enjoy turbulence and stuff. And like
I do too,
So, you know, because I bungee jumped, skydived, I've done all that stuff. So one time though, check this out. So, you know, with Metheny, we were in LA. I think we were going to play the Pantages Theater or the Wiltern. I can't remember which one. But anyway, when I got to my hotel room, I got this call from somebody that I didn't know. And he was kind of creepy. He was just weird. He was saying he knew all these drummers and all that stuff. And I kind of got this weird vibe. So I called one of the famous drummers that he had mentioned. And the guy said, yeah, stay away. This guy's not cool.
Okay.
So that night, you know, I'm backstage. We're about to go on. I'm where the crew bus is. And some guy comes up to me and starts talking. And at first I'm like, oh no, you know, I don't know if this is this guy. So we start talking. And after about couple of minutes, I realized it's not this guy. This guy's cool, you know. And then at one point he goes, hey man, you know, the show's sold out, you know, is there any way I can, you know, get a comp ticket? And I said, sure, I think I've got an extra one. So he goes, well, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, we have a day off. And he goes, well, you know, I'm an emergency flight instructor, so if you come out to Long Beach, I'll take you up. Whoa. So the next day I get in the cab, I go out to Long Beach Airport. And by this time, I had not skydived or anything by this, you know, yet. So the first thing he does, like he teaches me, you know, how to use a parachute in case the plane bends or he passes out. So, you know, then we go and we're walking to the plane and there's another plane taking off and it looks like it's going to stall on takeoff. And he goes, turn your head. But luckily the guy pulled out okay. So we get in this 2-seater Robin, and we take off, and in like 2 minutes he goes, "Here, take over." So I'm flying this thing, and we go over Long Beach, and he starts saying, "Okay, so now, like, do this with the rudder, do this, and like, so he had me doing stalls, ailerons,
Oh, wow,
and I'm driving, because he'll say, like, "Okay, hit the rudder and the pedals hard left, and look at the horizon, hit him like John Bonham," because I think he was a drummer, So I was doing, and then we buzzed the tower on the way in, and I got a chance to do this like 4 or 5 times with him whenever I was in LA.
That's cool.
That was
Wow,
amazing.
man.
Yeah.
So you hit it and bank it.
Yeah.
Woo.
But it was weird, because one of the things, there's no radar in that plane. So he said, make sure you're looking down and up and around, because, we don't want to collide with anyone. At one point, there was helicopter underneath us. So, you have to be really careful that you don't crash. But the next day, I met Pat and the band at the airport. We were flying somewhere else, Washington or something. And Pat was so happy to see me, because I thought he thinks I was going to get killed the first time I did that,
That's funny, man.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My favorite parts of flying, well, I have 4 things I like: taking off, turbulence, and landing. My 4th favorite part is more of a perspective change that happens when I'm way up, or even not way up. It could be 2,000 feet elevation, whatever altitude. It's just how small everything really is in life. Because you look down, it's like, well, my problems are nothing compared to all that's down there below me. You're 30,000 feet up.
Yeah.
And, it always forces me to think differently. And then the sound of the plane usually puts me to sleep. And if I have a good day, I write. But otherwise, I'm sleeping or writing, or maybe listening to some music. Flying is interesting. So if we take this, though, let's go back to the trains. Let's go back to the clickety clack. Let's go back to the rhythmic side of it.
Okay.
And then tie that in with drumming. I think that's a really interesting tie-in, actually. And I never really thought about the fact that maybe that's why I like trains, is because of the rhythmic aspect, even if it's on the newer rails, which are less clickety clack, but they're still there, especially if you're on a high-speed train. But yeah, that's a cool thing. I think we're a little bit, here we go again. We could be wired up just a little bit similarly if we appreciate that kind of thing. Last Train Home.
Yeah.
Great tune.
Of course.
So now if we dial back a little bit more, though.
Well, so far we've gone from like me being in college.
Yeah.
So I haven't broken in the scene yet. So I don't know if
this means we're going to have probably part 2 and 3 and 4.
Okay.
Which would be really cool. I'm totally into that. We'll have the Paul Wertico playlist. More
than you want to know about Paul Wertico,
See, to me, it's all cool. I just love it. So let's see. Chronologically, yeah. You were in college. You were doing the club scene. You did a lot of stuff. Did you actually move from where you grew up? Did you move to Chicago? How far did you grow up? How many hours away from Chicago were you growing up? Or were you right near there?
Well, Cary is like out by Barrington, Crystal Lake. So it's about, 45 minutes, an hour northwest of Chicago.
So it's, you can drive in and out of Chicago in a day or a night. That's okay.
Right.
Okay. So at what point were you doing the club scene? I mean, I know I saw you in a club in the North Lincoln area somewhere. You mentioned the other night what band you thought it might have been, and maybe even what club.
Yeah.
You're probably right.
Right. But that would have been, I joined like the Simon and Bard group, like, in 1980 or around that time.
I remember that.
I kind of broke in the scene. I mean, after college, basically, I moved to Elgin, Illinois, and I had like this small house. And I had this band, Earwax Control, with 2 guys, Jeff Check and Gordon James, who were friends of mine. And before that, I was already playing with a lot, some different people, but we were still really young. We hadn't gotten in on the scene yet. I met Gordon and Jeff one time because I had this band with this guy Randy Waldman, who is now the piano player with Barbra Streisand and Josh Groban, has that fantastic stuff with the superheroes. He uses Vinnie Colaiuta. So he was just out of high school or in high school still. Had a band with him. I think Kim Derrigan was on bass. And the trumpet player, Doug Scharf, is Sven. I don't know if you have Sven Gulli, the show Sven Gulli, but the guy that plays, the red-haired guy that plays piano, that was Doug Scharf. So we had this band. So all of a sudden, Gordon, who I did not know, that lived in Elgin, I was still living in Cary, he invited me, to this jam session. So we played, and I remember, Randy, who was just this amazing piano player, just ripped through like Bye Bye Blackbird and all 12 keys, like we're playing like 300 beats per minute. And it was great. And then they left. I think Steve Laspina was in that at that time too. And they left. So then it's just me and Gordon. And Gordon goes, well, we should play. I've got this friend, Jeff Check, this bass player. So the next day we got together and we formed Earwax Control, basically. We had a different name for it at first, a New World Trio, I think we were called. But then, we were still out in Elgin, and then we started breaking in. So like Jeff would get a gig downtown in Chicago, and he'd go, I got this drummer, and then I'd get a gig, and I'd say, I've got this bass player. So we kind of started hopscotching. So I started playing with a bunch of different people, like Joe Daly, who is this amazing sax player, teacher. I got a gig with him, every night, every Monday at Orphans, and then this trombone player who was like this great trombone player, Bill Porter, started playing with his trombone, was a septet. And so, one thing kind of led to another, And before you know it, people hear you or they hear about you and they hire you. And before I know, I was playing with everybody in Chicago,
Yeah, that's cool.
And then, I can name so many people. I mean, it's just like, think about everybody basically in Chicago, And then I did a gig with the Simon and Bard group. Before it was just Fred Simon and Michael Bard. Steve Robbie and I did a gig, and then they wanted me to go on tour with them. And I was really so busy in Chicago, but my wife, who was still my girlfriend at that time, says, no, you should go, you should play music. So even though I could have easily made more money doing sessions and staying in Chicago, I went on the road, like sleeping on people's floors and, 48-hour drives to play at some auditorium and, Spokane or something.
Sure.
But we were playing original music. And that's sort of, now to go back, when I was with Joe Daly, we were going to play the Jazz Showcase. Mm-hmm. So I'd been with him for like 2 years, and we got this gig at the Happy Medium, and then Pat Metheny calls me to do a week. And, I knew who Pat was. I had seen him play, but I turned him down, because I was with Joe for like 2 years, and this was going to be, the biggest gig, with Joe. Because, the Showcase was like the place. It's like playing, the Village Vanguard. So I turned Pat down at that time. And that gig was with Muhal Richard Abrams and Steve Laspina. It was, great gig with Joe. It turned out to be like one of the coldest weekends of the century. I remember that too. So we didn't have a lot of people. But then, Pat, we didn't really stay in touch that much. I went to see him play a couple times, but then he saw me play with the Simon and Bard group in Portland, Oregon, in late 82. And then he asked me, I just said hi, I didn't think anything of it. And then he called me to play for a percussionist's audition, because Nana had left. So I said, sure, I'll play, I'll back up the percussionist. And that lasted like a half hour. And then we ended up playing like 12 hours, So it was like one of these real natural kind of things, because I really believe in life, if you do the right thing for the right reason, and you always have forks in the road, so you never know where things are going to lead. But I think instinctually, hopefully, if you let your better angels take over, hopefully you'll end up at a place you're happy with in your life. And that's sort of how that happened. Because even teaching at universities, I mean, I was adjunct at Northwestern for 16 years. And like, I didn't think about teaching at a university because I was touring, but I did a clinic in Lawrence, Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin in Lawrence, Wisconsin. And then Patsy Dash and Jim Ross, who were in the Chicago Symphony, happened to be teaching at Northwestern. So they were also on that festival. And they said, hey, do you want to teach at Northwestern? I went, well, Sure. And that's how I got the gig at Roosevelt.
That's pretty cool.
You know, yeah, you know, it was like one of those kind of things where it just, you know, it just kind of happens if you're in the right place, right time and stuff, you know? So,
Yeah.
What can I say?
Well, plus keeping the doors open, keeping your eyes open.
It is right.
Right. You know, and going with the energy. Like I've had conversations with people, and I think I relate to it more now. I'm a late bloomer. You know, I never really understood anything quickly in my life, but to understand the whole thing about the feelings involved, the energy, the chemistry that can be involved, whether it's music or not.
Yeah.
And then being open to receiving a similar or a good chemistry. I mean, it's great, you know, and so opening up to that as a possibility from different areas, that's a part of the growth, I guess. And then, so let's go back then. Pat called you, you did the 30 minutes or whatever percussion, then you 12 hours of,
yeah, the guy left, and then we played as a quartet, you know.
Okay. So now, was that the beginning of you? Was that was that the cause for joining Pat's band, let's say?
Yeah, because you know, I really wasn't that familiar with all his music, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Bright Size Life, but Watercolors was not one of my favorite albums, and that's when he called me that first time. Not that had anything to do with my decision. The decision was to be loyal to Joe Daly. Yeah. But then, you know, I really didn't know Are You Going With Me or any of those songs. So I was kind of almost learning it on the audition. And I didn't think of it as an audition for me. I just thought we were going to go jam, you know. Mm-hmm. So Pat, you know, this is like right around Christmas time. So Pat goes, you know, step out for a second. We want to talk. So I'm outside, not outside, but I'm outside from where we're playing in this warehouse, freezing, you know. Mm-hmm. And they come in, and then Pat goes, well, you know, I'm going to be in town in Chicago like New Year's Day. So why don't you learn some of the music? So Steve and I get together, and Steve's, because there's no drum chart. So Steve's kind of teaching me some of this music. And the three of us jammed like on New Year's Day in some hotel, you know, in downtown Chicago. Oh, wow. And then a couple of days later, Pat calls me up and goes, you know, do you have a passport? And I said, no. And he goes, well, get one. We're going to Europe. And that's how the gig happened, you know?
That's pretty cool. So wait, so was Steve already in Pat's band?
Steve was, yeah, Steve okay. Joined, you know, because Steve and I, we had played with this guitar player, Ross Trout, who knew Pat really well. And so we were playing similar music to what the Metheny band was playing, you know, but you know, not thinking about like anything. And I think Steve knew Lyle and Pat from one of those Stan Kenton kind of, you know, camps. You know, I never went to any of that stuff. I've always been sort of, you know, I've never been really one to kind of join like things like that. I always was sort of like in the cracks. You know, even the way I listen to music and the way I think is like sort of like different, you know, for whatever reason. So Steve knew and got that gig. And then he did Off Ramp, and then he did Travels, you know. So
yeah, right.
So then I think Steve, I'm sure, because what happened in Oregon in '82 is that Steve and Pat came down to hear the Simon and Bard group, and I'm playing, and Larry Gray is playing bass, you know. And I just said, hi, Pat. You know, I didn't even talk to him really. It was like not thinking about anything other than just making music and playing. It was never, like I said, it was never like a master plan to get anything done, you know. It was just going with the flow.
Well, it's interesting for me because I saw you in clubs, and then it was probably a year later, I think, that I saw you at Ravinia.
Oh yeah,
with Pat.
Okay.
And right. I hadn't seen. Well, I had seen Pat's band a few times with Danny Gottlieb, and was Mark Egan the original bass player?
Yeah, and I played so much with Mark now, like with the Larry Coryell Power Trio.
Oh,
we've toured all over the world as a trio, so I got a chance to, you know, Mark and I are good friends too.
That's cool. Yes, so I'd seen Pat the first time at Cornell. It was Bailey Hall at Cornell University, like an hour away from me. Nana was there, Danny, and Mark. And then yeah, I remember when, okay, I'm just trying to get my own timeline together thinking. So Rogby came in after Mark, and then you came in, and then you were there. You were with Pat.
Nana Vasconcelos would have been, around the same
that was late 70s.
Steve Rodby, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. That would have been early 80s.
Yeah, I know I went there with some. It was either the first or second year of college, so it was either in 79 or 80, probably 80. And Nana was there. It's the only time I ever saw him. But once you got the Metheny gig, you were there for quite a while. Was it like 16, 18 years? How long?
Yeah, like 18 years, basically.
Yeah, that's good. I saw you a bunch of times with him. Yeah, my son and I went. I think we were talking maybe about this either the other night or before we started live. I saw you here with my son, who at the time would have been maybe like 7 or 8.
Wow.
He's going to be 34 this year in April. He and I went to the Landmark Theater here in Syracuse. And it was like a 3-hour show, which that's another thing.
Yeah, they all were, You
always get your money's worth with Pat Metheny, right?
Now imagine doing 2 of those shows the same night.
No, I can't imagine that.
Man,
I actually can't because of what, But we were just shaking our heads when we left. Well, we were shaking our heads after 2 minutes. But what a beautiful show. I think Pedro Enzar was with you.
Yeah. He joined when I joined. We joined at the same time.
Okay. He's from South America somewhere, right?
Yeah, he's like huge down there. He comes from like sort of a band that was sort of like the Beatles of South America. Wow. So
he's still playing and stuff.
Oh yeah, man, he's doing great. If you go to his Facebook page, like he'll post something and within like an hour he's got 3,000 people liking it. No, he's doing really well.
That's
great
good.
Guy.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a really broad question. Sometimes I just don't articulate well because it's a really wide open-ended question. Just a wide open question. What the overall experience of working with Pat Metheny? What was that like for you?
Well, it was great. I mean, it was different because, to all of a sudden be at that level, playing at that level every night, and having, each set. I mean, once we came and got a set, that set was going to be that set for that particular leg of the tour, if not the entire tour. So, because I came from stuff. I mean, like when I played with Larry Coryell, I'd played with him on and off since 1979. I mean, in all those years, we never had a set list. We go on, we play the showcase, we play the Syracuse Jazz Festival or whatever, the Blue Note in New York or whatever. No set list. He would just start. He wouldn't even say, we're going to play, let's start with all the things. I mean, no, we would just start playing. Now with Pat, he pretty much knew the curve of the set. So you had to figure out a way to keep it interesting, not only for the audience, but for yourself. And since a lot of this stuff when I joined was with sequencers too, you kind of knew like how many choruses of a guitar solo there's going to be in this tune or how many choruses of a piano solo, So you had to figure out because if you listen to a lot of stuff, I even put on that, the Not So Modern Drummer, I would do things. I'd stop in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I always like to play unexpectedly. You couldn't do that with Pat's music. You had to keep it, you could do what you did on the record and then you could start, enhancing it. And then maybe there'd be a point where Pat would say, okay, you're going a little too far off from what the original idea was. So you go back. So it was more about like micro improvisation rather than macro improvisation. Okay. And then just other things that at first I didn't understand, like, we would not sit next to each other on the plane, or our hotel rooms would be separate, maybe even separate floors. And at first I didn't really, I'm thinking, man, we're in a band, we should be, but then I realized that, you need your space too. You don't want to know what other people are doing or have to talk to someone or have them talk to you when you didn't want to talk. Cause it's like a marriage. You're going out for like 2.5 months, coming home for 3 weeks, going out for another 2 months. So that was another thing to kind of learn on how to do the professional thing, keep it really fresh, you know, play your best all the time, and then still deal with, you know, like being away from your family. You know, I didn't have a family at that time. I was, you know, my wife, you know, was my girlfriend. Then we got married at that time, but still, you know, you were really away when you were away. So like if you're in Germany, you know, you might call like every 3 or 4 days because it was so expensive back then. It's not like this, you know, so there was a lot, and I had never been to Europe before. That's when Pat asked me, do you have a passport? I said, no. So, you know, it was very interesting to all of a sudden being these different countries, which I loved because, you know, you really realize that people are great everywhere and that fans are fantastic and the different cuisines and the different cultures. And, you know, it was such an illuminating, life affirming kind of experience. So it was great.
Yeah. Man, I just had a whole bunch of thoughts, but one of them is, oh, I know what it was. And I actually have a question from Mike in just a minute, but
okay.
At Pat's shows, it's one of the few situations where I would actually emote. I mean, I could go into tears sometimes because of what I heard from, it wasn't just Pat, it was everybody's, the band. I remember one time, Syracuse Jazz Fest. And I love how you guys set up in the band because I had a direct line of looking at your left hand, your right hand, because your hi-hat, you know, you were facing your left side, usually kind of faced.
Yeah, it's facing in, right.
And that was a beautiful setup for a drummer, from a drummer perspective, because I got to watch what you're doing. So I'm standing in the front row of this outdoor festival, and you're probably not even 15 feet away from me. And to be that close, and to, you know, with all the, I think I was listening more to stage monitors than I was the front end.
I'm sure you were.
And that was totally cool. But I mean, I remember my friend of mine, Dave, was with me, and he says, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Because this is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, and I'm very happy." But, you know, it was such a moving experience. And I'm wondering, have you ever had any experiences, well, could be as a listener, but how about as a performer, were you ever moved? It's almost like a spiritual experience or an emotive experience.
I'm always moved. I mean, that's when you play, you know, you're giving of yourself to a bigger thing, whatever that thing is. And it's basically playing you. I always tell my students, you know, if you're not, if you're not gigging, you know, so go practice. It's almost like you're sending the world a message that I'm getting better here. Give me another chance. And when you play, you know, if you listen to yourself only, it's going to be really boring because you hear yourself all the time. So it's letting all that other information come in. And, you know, and I'm really always moved by music. I mean, like even when I teach a class, I mean, I might play, you know, a rock class, a Jimi Hendrix thing or something, and I'm like fighting back tears because it gets to me even to this day. And I remember, you know, we were talking about the brown shoe earlier.
Yeah.
And I remember one time going with my girlfriend at the time, and we heard, it was a bunch of guys from the AACM, you know. So Joseph Jarman was one of the sax players, him and Roscoe Mitchell. So he's playing this sax solo, it was a tenor solo, and I was weeping uncontrollably. You know, it was avant-garde, but it moved me. I mean, and I couldn't hold back. I mean, I wasn't just a little tear. I was like bawling my eyes out, you know? So I think we're really blessed to be able to feel music, because not everybody does. You know, some people are tone deaf. Some people, you know, it just means nothing to them. And for us to be able to be moved so much by someone moving air, you know, with sound is really a gift in so many ways.
Yeah, it really is. This is a little bit off. It's a similar topic, but different band. I was at Joe Siegel's to watch Dexter Gordon, front row seat. You know, I could have rested my feet on the stage. So one thing that was kind of interesting is whenever Dexter wasn't playing, after the head and after solo or whatever, he went over in the corner. He was playing in the corner while the others are playing, like Kirk Lightsey and the Eubanks on bass, or Eddie Gladden. And so after, because I stayed for 2 sets, because I'm never going to go home after one set.
Right, we used to stay for 2 sets for sure.
Yeah, you got to stay for 2.
Yeah.
So I would get up and go over and listen to the Dexter play while Kirk Lights, he's playing a piano solo or something. And I'm hearing Dexter and I'm getting teary again because, you know, the guy had this big, beautiful sound and he was so Dexter. I mean, of course he was, but it was just amazing to me. And it was very moving. I love that. And with the Metheny shows, forget about it, man. I just had to bring a box of Kleenex.
That's great. Well, it's when you listen to certain musicians, it's the soul of the musicians that you're experiencing. The problem sometimes with, when you hear people that just have a lot of technique, but nothing to say, that happens a lot nowadays because, people practice so much, but if they're not living a life that gives them any kind of foundation and context in which to tell about that life, then it's kind of boring. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when you listen to somebody like Dexter, sure, he's an incredible musician. He's got great technique, but that really wasn't what was getting to you. It's how he was saying what he was saying,
Exactly.
That's really what it's about.
Do you know he's in the movie called The Awakening with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro?
I heard about that. I don't know. I think I've ever seen that because around midnight, of course, he got an Academy Award nomination.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, he was great.
I was watching maybe just 3 weeks ago, and still at the tail end of COVID, and I watched a bunch of movies and a lot of music videos and all that. But because I love on my phone, you can just Chromecast right to the digital TV, and boom, U2's on the big screen, right? So it's so cool. But my wife and I were watching. We saw The Awakenings was coming on. It's like, oh my God, we got to watch this because that's based on a true story where Robin Williams plays the role of a real life doctor who passed away a few years ago, Dr. Oliver Sacks. And I happen to know a doctor in New York City, Dr. Stanley Fahn, who's like the godfather of all neurology, who's probably 86, 87 now, who was best friends with Oliver Sacks. So when I went down and got to hang around with Stanley, he was telling me all these Oliver Sacks stories and about Awakenings, the book I think there is, and the movie.
Well, because there's the man who mistook his wife for a hat.
Yeah.
Because I've read all those books too. So
Musicophilia. Musicophilia is another one.
Right.
But anyway, so Dexter doesn't have any dialogue in the movie, but he plays the part of a patient in a psychiatric ward. And it's really interesting because at one point, I didn't look it up. I'm curious, and I'm sorry we're getting off track, but it's actually really fun. There's a scene where a lot of the people that's why it's called The Awakenings, because of people coming alive and out of, like, De Niro comes out of a catatonic state, based on a true story. Other people are coming alive and their memories are getting better, and there's a piano in this hall or something. And Dexter's seated there. Now, I don't know if he was playing the piano. I'd love to find out if Dexter was actually playing in that, but it's beautiful music. And he just did a great job through his facial expressions in the whole movie of being Dexter. He played the role so well without saying a word. It was beautiful.
He was
you might want to check that out, Awakenings. So I'm going to switch to a completely different topic.
Okay. Right. See, that's what I love this. To me, that's what life is too. It doesn't have to be a direct line, like I'm saying, you have to remember what you did. So if you want to re-reference it later on, but in general, it goes where it goes. It's the difference between driving on the interstate or taking like small roads where you get to see, different towns and everything.
Exactly. It's almost like improvisation during conversation, right?
It is.
We're going with the flow.
Right.
So when I do these, I want it to be like we're sitting down across from each other at a table. We're just drinking coffee and we're just talking.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So several years ago, I was hired to do a clinic in Argentina. It was in Mendoza. Okay, that's where you have the great great wine comes from. Okay, so I was really late. I was flying in from the United States, And so my flight was late and everything. So I kind of got there maybe a couple hours right before the clinic. So I didn't chance to even clean up or anything. So we went to have lunch before the clinic. Okay, a late lunch, because the food in Argentina is the greatest, the steaks and everything. So
yeah, it is.
The promoter
and it was awesome.
The promoter and a couple drummers, that were part of the festival, we're sitting around a table drinking wine and everything, waiting for me to go on. And it's like this, we were talking freely, openly. So I said, man, for my clinic, let's set up a table. Let's put some food and some wine, and let's sit around and give the audience a chance to hear us as if they're not there, which we did. And that went over really well. Yeah.
Gee, that's really great. I think it's one of the reasons that, well, I know for sure that people enjoy a conversation like this. If they want to learn about Paul Wertico,
yeah,
we just want to talk.
Right.
And I appreciate this a lot. Trains, planes, and automobiles and drums. So yeah, so let's go over this question from Mike Mallow.
Okay.
He would like to ask Paul if the gig sorry, wait, well, we have two questions. Hold on a second. Okay, I'm going to go in order here. I'll just read it here. I'd like to ask Paul about his dream cymbal endorsement and how was the changeover from Paiste. And yeah, I noticed, I've known for a while now you use Dream cymbals, and I hadn't heard of them until I actually heard that you were using them. So actually, I'd love to learn about them, if you don't mind sharing.
No. I'm not going to go into the whole details about Paiste and all that. I'm just going to, because I had great experience with Paiste too. But Dream, they're made in Wuhan, which is interesting, and they're kind of based in Canada and Toronto. And so the cymbals, I'm kind of working with them. Hopefully, we're going to work on even getting a signature product happening too, which is I've always wanted to do that. But the cymbals are really, they're very organic, because I used to play. Like when I was younger, I started out on Paistes with my first kit, but in the days when I'd go down Frank's Drum Shop or Drums Unlimited, I would buy some cymbals, but I didn't have a lot of money. So, I'd buy some Zilko cymbals or something. So a lot of my favorite recordings that I did in the early days were on like cheaper cymbals, because they just felt real earthy to me, And so Dream has that quality. They have that kind of, like the buttery feel when you play, it's a different sound. So it's not necessarily the sound that I'm known for. If you think of me with the real pristine sound, I mean, I can get that sound because it sounds weird to say, but I can play any cymbal and make it sound like me, because it's all in your touch. It really is. It's the way you strike things. It's the way you hold the stick, but in general, I was kind of going for more of like an earlier sound of mine, like more like a dirtier sound, like when you talk about Elvin Jones and all that,
Sure.
Because it's so they're really great, and that's what that's about, So there's probably a lot more to come, because even the week that the COVID thing hit, the last gig I did was in Denver with Fareed Haq. On the 15th of March. So then the next week I was supposed to do a clinic, thing for Dream, but it got canceled, in Pittsburgh, I think it was, because, of the COVID thing. So there's a lot more to come with that. But, again, to me, the instruments have to speak. They have to follow the way you speak. Some people are more monotone. Some people have a really wide range of dynamics when they talk. So when I play, I use a wide range of dynamics too. So I really, want to have the instruments follow what I'm hearing as I play. Right. So that's sort of what that's about.
That totally makes sense. I mean, I agree with you. And I don't think it sounded odd at all that you can make any cymbal sound like you, because it's you.
Yeah, it's me
with the cymbal, and you know what to do. You know what you want it to sound like. You'll
bring
it out.
I also like that article about, like, in Not So Modern Drummer, I paint when I play. I don't strike straight up and down unless that's the sound I need. But I'm using all kind of swiping motions So
Well,
I'm getting these colors. And so if you don't play like that, if you play straight up and down, you know, you'll get a certain consistency in your sound. But I'm looking for all these colors that go up in pitch, that go down in pitch, you know, more like the way we talk. You know, we don't talk just like this every time, you know, where it's exactly the same and cut off.
yeah,
You know, we go for dips and, you know, if you're asking a question, your voice goes up. You know, if you're making a statement, your voice goes down. You know,
yeah,
that's when you're talking through the instrument, that's what you're trying to actually put out there, because people don't know what's in your head. You know, it's being translated through you to your instrument, and the sound that the instrument makes is what they hear, and that's what they're understanding. So the best way to get them to understand really what you're thinking is that have the best translation possible.
absolutely. You know, I just don't mean to be rude, but I heard everything you said, and I actually have a comment about that in a second. I was looking for a couple of the videos that you sent to me, but there's one. Well, first of all, we'll get to that in a second. I took a course, I don't know, 25 years ago, and about vocabulary and intonation of your voice, because I knew at some point I get into speaking in front of people, which I actually really enjoy. Especially, you know, if we get engaged and you can help people and whatever. But the thing that stands out the most to me is when the guy said, when your parents said, go to your room, they said it like that, didn't they? If they did, right? They didn't say, Carl, go to your room.
Right, exactly.
No, because you don't have any command over a question or an upswing, because an upswing is a question, a downswing is a statement.
And so many people don't know that. So many people go, I've just heard somebody I really respected recently, and everything that he was talking about was a statement of fact, but every sentence went up at the end, which made him sound like he was not sure of what he was saying.
You know, there's an episode on Joe Rogan, who I occasionally listen to, and I can't remember who he's talking to. No, I do. I don't. It's Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuro professor of neurobiology or neuro something, a really, really fascinating guy. And I follow him closely. And they were talking about the San Jose techie world and how everyone is like being in a clique. And they all talk like this. And Paul Wertico played with Pat Metheny, and he has some really good projects he's worked on, and he's an amazing musician. And it was all upswings. And of course, they go into this dialogue about what it means, and maybe there's a disorder in the brain or whatever, and it's not a disorder, it's just a way of speaking. When you get around people who speak like that, you tend to take on what they do, right? But it was really funny. It was really funny. So there's a video of you playing drums. I just can't, my history's, it's buried in the history. It was one of the links you sent me, and it's like drums and art. Drums and
is that hold on for a second.
And just so you know,
I'll share that. Hold on.
Yeah, please.
Because I've got Facebook pulled up. So let me do this.
I probably was so psyched out when I saw it. I probably posted it and tagged you. But
well, it was on Facebook, you know. And the thing that's interesting, that was the beginning of one of the tours with SVB. So I had just landed in Warsaw, and a filmmaker asked me if I would do this thing, you know. And so I landed, I went to the hotel really quickly, took a shower, and then they set up this drum set, and they just asked me to play. So I played a lot of different, you know, just solos. So I never met the painter.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
So that was put together by the director that had asked me to do it. No, I love that. It was so much fun. He did a really good job.
Oh, I love it too. It's
you see it? I put it up in the chat if anyone's interested.
I got it. Yes, I got it. So yeah, so a friend of mine, Rebecca, who's an amazing photographer, we had talked about something like this probably 10 years ago. And as soon as I saw that, I got done watching, I sent her the link. I said, okay, it's time. We need to do our thing now. It's a photography drum thing.
Yeah, sure.
So just some different type of expressions. So let me go back here. So I have another question from Michael. He's curious about, there was, I think, a gig in '89 in Montreal, 90,000 people.
Oh, that was that the Montreal Jazz Festival? It might have been the 10th anniversary or one of those. We had a lot of people. Because I remember
maybe
it looked like a Grateful Dead concert. It was outside, and it was, as far as you can see, there were people up the street. They even had different time speakers there.
Oh, wow.
I thought I had heard that there were like 120,000 people at that. I'm not, I think
Maybe.
what he said, 90,000 or something, Mike said, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Is that one of the bigger audiences you've had?
That's one of the bigger ones for sure.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine. I remember the two.
Well, it's all the same. I mean, seriously, man, like when you play, you feel the audience energy, of course. And it's great because when you see a lot of people, you're sharing your music with a lot of people. But in general, once the music starts, you're sort of in your own world with the band, and a lot of times,
that's true. Yeah.
And a lot of times people, like if you're in a club, like for instance, you were talking about like the Dexter thing, it's great to play clubs because sometimes you can just look and you see the people. You can feel them. When you start playing, auditoriums or bigger arenas, a lot of times you can just see, sort of faces down there with some lights on that kind of come on and off. There's not that direct connection, which, so it doesn't take a lot to get used to it. I mean, you do, because you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. But it is interesting because you can't really make a living necessarily playing in clubs that easily, but the club thing is great because on a break, you can go to the bar and talk to people. When you play a bigger arena, a lot of times after the show, they throw everybody out. So unless people have, guest passes, they're usually gone,
Right.
Even though, like, I have to say, we played in Russia in '87, and that was really fascinating because we played these big like hockey arena kind of things. We played 5 nights it was Leningrad, which is St. Petersburg. Then we played 5 nights in Moscow and then 5 nights in Kiev. And that was really fascinating because when we went over there, we had not been to Russia, and we got books on like, okay, what do you do when you're in Russia, and the way they talked about the people over there. So which was totally wrong. It was totally opposite of what they were like. So you get done playing, and you come out the stage door and there'd be like hundreds of people waiting for you, but to give you things. I had drummers giving me their drumsticks and stuff,
Wow,
it was so fun. And then we go to clubs and hang out all night and jam until 5:30 in the morning because it was white nights. It was great. And then when we got to Kiev, we were in the airport and there was a brochure in the airport about what Americans are like, and that was hilarious because it was just the opposite, like of what we think we are. So again, that's the other thing about traveling is that you really get a chance to see people in a different way than they're portrayed often by, the powers that be,
Oh yeah. And I didn't start traveling until 6 years ago internationally. And not as a drummer, as an educator, but I was so fascinated, and I have been so fascinated. Danny Gottlieb is here. Hey, Danny, what's up, man?
Danny's here. Oh my god!
Yeah, Danny's on. He just said, "Hey, great," on Facebook. So, hey, Danny, good to see you, man. Cultures, cuisine, just the vibe. I love going to Mexico because I just love it there. The people have been so warm and friendly, among the warmest population I've ever met in my life, anywhere in the world. It's just so cool.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. So,
and I love Italian food. So, like I'm in Italy a lot. I've got like 3 or 4 bands in Italy. And, I remember playing the Blue Note there in Milan with Coriel. And I went into the kitchen, and watched and, asked questions, a lot of times. Cool. So now I know people that make this amazing homemade gelato and stuff. And so, I'm always taking notes, like trying to, figure out how they do it, which is fascinating.
Did you tell me the other night you like to cook?
I love to cook. Yeah.
Oh,
and I make the stuff up.
Well, I can't, Yeah, I was only in Italy once 2 years ago. Only Rome to teach.
Oh,
Just 2.5 days. One day of work, a day and a half of me time. I walked
oh,
miles and miles and miles, and I ate the best pasta I've ever had. It was just amazing, and
oh.
I need to go back.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I've been all over. I mean, I've probably been to Italy, probably 40, 50 times.
Mm-hmm.
And, because all the different regions have their
Yeah,
specialties,
yeah,
you know,
right.
and then just the people are just great. I mean, everything about, I mean, my wife and I have talked, if we ever moved from the States, that would be one of the countries we would consider moving to, because
Yeah,
we just love it there.
that's great, man. So let's 'cause here's what we're gonna have to do. I've got a
Okay.
few minutes, but I can hang for a little bit, and I want to. I actually don't want to stop talking, but um, let's just right now determine this is part one. We'll
Okay.
have to have a part two. Part
Sure.
three might
If
have
other
the
people, if other people are interested, there's so much we can talk about.
oh
Yeah.
god, yeah, they'll be interested for sure. I know this for sure. So that is a given then. So we're going to do the Paul Wertico Chronicles here.
Okay.
But also I want to talk a little bit about what you sent me well, the links from that article and Not So Modern Drummer. I'm telling you, man, I needed that. I'm not just saying this because you're with me, but folks, seriously, um, like we were talking before, and you even told me yesterday or the day before, there's stuff you were on and you played that a lot of people don't know about.
Uh-huh.
Like, geez, man, and the stuff that I'm hearing just about everything. It's like I needed this fix, man. I needed to hear this because sonically and musically and in so many different ways, it's fulfilling something in me that I've felt empty. It's been an empty feeling recently. And it's like, now I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to listen to this stuff for a long time because probably over and over, because I tend to do things like that. And I'll replay that playlist over and over. And what are some of your favorite projects that you have worked on? Some of the favorite recordings or bands outside of Metheny?
Okay, hold on. I just shared that link,
Oh, good.
to that article
Oh,
in the
yeah.
chat
So,
room.
and if you want, I can share that on Facebook too afterwards. I'll
Sure.
put it in the comments. So we'll share that in a while, folks, in the comments section after we're done here today. But there are links towards the bottom of the article. You just got to go check the stuff out. And it's not just you; it's the each group,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the each player and the things that I'm hearing. The 8x12 one, that was the first one I listened to, and then
Oh,
I went
okay.
down the list, and I'm like, okay, I really needed this. So like, it seems. Do you have like magnets in you that just attracts players like that?
I don't know. I don't know.
It could be an energy,
Again,
Like,
it's putting yourself, I guess, on the right path to meet, and be in the right place at the right time. But the one thing I mean, even for me, when I put that together, the music just flies. Did you notice that? Whether it's in 7/4 or 5/4, it goes and it just,
it
I mean,
does.
and that was the one thing that really struck me because it's all different. So the music plays me, in other words, I don't come in and play a set licks. So you're not going to hear like Paul Wertico licks because I don't think there really are any. I mean, if someone asked me who I am, I would not be able to say, well, here, check this out. And you'll know. It's just, I just react to the music, and I've been blessed to play with a lot of great musicians that let me be me. And then, a lot of that stuff might be even first takes. I mean, there's things I never even heard before. And then you just react to the music as it comes,
Exactly. I was just thinking that you're interacting. You're like, so this topic comes around a lot. And maybe it's because I'm more aware of it now, especially since my granddaughter was born. She brought me in, this is 3 months ago, but I've been working on this for a while. It's just, I'm really slow at learning shit. So anyways, this brings you to the subject of here and now, being present and being in the moment, because like you cannot play like that with that kind of interaction if you're not with them and in the moment, and that is first of all, I think it's a gift to be able to practice that discipline, if you will, of being here and now. I mean, you could say it's also maybe it's your job, you're supposed to do that, but you do it in such a way where the interaction is amazing. I think
Thanks.
this is amazing. I love it.
And I always tell my students, it's about serving the music. So it's not about drawing attention to yourself,
No,
because if the music is successful, then you're successful, because everybody has to be successful to make the music successful. So a lot of times I think drummers make the mistake about like, listen to me, look at me, how great I am. And I mean, that works for certain people. I mean, that's a lot of times those kind of drummers are the ones that do a lot of the clinics and festivals because they're chop monsters and they stick out in the music. But for me, the musicians I always loved made these great, you can almost isolate their drum parts by themselves and it makes total sense, but it fits inside the music, as opposed to sticks on top of it. So that's and and I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, because there's tons of famous drummers that just they draw other drummers because their playing draws attention to themselves. But I guess that's not something I really wanted to do.
Well, I think it's really important too, because you get I think maybe a more complete musical statement delivered to the audience, the listener, when you're all interacting and you're not trying to shine. Not that it's wrong to do that here and there, or you just do it as a group. One of my favorite musical experiences was Grant Park, when there was a Grant Park. Is it still there, Chicago?
It's still there, sure. Yeah, Millennium Park now.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I saw the Bean when I was there.
And Roosevelt's right across the street from Buckingham Fountain.
Yeah. In fact, I took the train to Chicago on that trip. But anyways, they used to have these concerts there. Count Basie, and I remember seeing Glenn Campbell there. He opened up for Count Basie. Miles, saw Freddie Hubbard with Tony, Ron, and McCoy Tyner. But I also saw Cecil Taylor with Ed Blackwell. And I don't know who the bass player was, but whoever usually worked with them, it was that guy. And that was a situation where when I listened to any of Cecil's music previously, I didn't understand anything. I just couldn't sonically get it. But to actually watch them interact with each other, they're doing that too, man. That was a show that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did, which I enjoyed a ton. Did you ever see Cecil or Ed Blackwell or run into them?
No, I saw all those guys. I mean, again, go back to the Brown Shoe. One time I saw Cecil, and it was with Jimmy Lyons on alto and Andrew Cyril on drums, like my favorite drummers. And so they were playing, and they're playing, and they're playing, and it's just fantastic. And Joe Siegel's trying to get him to stop. So finally, he just turns on the fluorescent lights in the club, and then they just stopped. I remember that.
I actually remember Joe Siegel too, because he was there every time I went.
Oh yeah, of course.
He was very friendly and greeted everybody and went around and took care of musicians.
Yeah, he brought all this amazing music to Chicago. I mean, we gave him a doctorate. A doctorate degree, Roosevelt University, it was a few years ago now.
Well, is he still alive?
He just died recently, with last year.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, did you sorry, I just had one of those moments. I'm thinking about Ornette Coleman. Did you ever work with him or see him or know him at all?
Yeah, I never got a chance to work with him. I've even dedicated songs to him. Like on the album Another Side, there's a song called Oh Man, So, but I got a chance to see them at the Jazz Showcase at the Happy Medium. It was Ed Blackwell and who was it? I think Buell. Who was playing? David Isaacson was playing bass. It was fantastic. Yeah, so I got a chance to. I got a chance to hear many of these people.
Gee, that's cool.
Which is
I saw it at one time, and it's actually amazing. In maybe '86. It was the Song X tour. It was.
I saw that too. I saw it at Northwestern at Pickstager Hall.
Oh yeah. I think that's the same hall where I saw Roy, Miroslav, and Chick. But, anyways, So that was my first time seeing Jack DeJohnette and Charlie Hayden. And of course, Donardo was there, but Ornette. It was just really cool to watch those guys interact with each other. That whole thing, But I want to get back to you. I want to talk about a little bit more here with this. Oh no, it's not a question; it's a comment. Florence is great. Yeah, Florence, Italy. I've heard it's great. I haven't been there yet.
Oh,
with
wonderful.
So the link that you posted in here, that goes to the article, right? Not So Modern
Yeah.
Drummer. Okay, yeah. So folks, and I'll post this for those who are not in Zoom right now. I'm going to copy this and paste it after we get done in the comments, and maybe a separate post too, just to draw more attention. You got to check it out. It's a great article. I love how the interview talks about the shapes. I think next time, part 2, we got to get into this whole shape thing of playing too, because
David Barcelo did the, was the interviewer, and I thought he did a fantastic job.
He did. He did. And, the other thing too is, like you were saying, different directions and all that. It's not just this all the time. It's this. And, you can draw a hell of a lot more out of a cymbal and a drum that way than
you can just, one cymbal is enough if you play like that. You can just go to a whole gig with just a cymbal, and you'd still be able to swing the band and not get bored,
Yeah.
Really,
There's a lot to that. So yeah, check out that link, folks, because there's some freaking awesome music. The links down below. There's got to be like 15 or 20 links at least. It's great. Well, yeah, I don't want to have to go, but I actually do need to soon for a couple of reasons. My one dog passed away a few days ago. I have another dog here, and she's lonely and sad, and plus she needs a little maintenance, and I've got to take care of her in a minute, get some other things ready for my wife when she gets home. But yeah, so this is part 1. We're not done. We're just getting started, my friend.
Okay, I'm down.
I really, really appreciate your taking this time. I love your energy.
Oh,
and talking to you the other night, as soon as you picked up the phone, it's like, okay, I get it. I get it, because so often you'll find the person's energy matches their playing. You have a dynamic, in my opinion, and I mean it as a compliment, energy, personality, your expression, articulation. Well, take it over to music. I mean, it's like, there he is. Paul came with himself to the gig, and he played him. I mean, you let the music play you, but you can still say, you're still doing your thing, and your vocabulary just comes out not in words, but through this, respective to the situation. So I'm actually really psyched, and as soon as I get off of this, I'm going to start that playlist.
Okay.
And then in a little while, I'll post the link that you've shared. This has been a real pleasure, man.
Thanks, Carl. Absolutely. And hi, Mike. I see you I just opened up the chat. I can see a lot of great comments from you. Appreciate it. So
yeah. There's a couple comments that I didn't read. I'm sorry, Fernando.
I didn't see him.
Yeah, first time I saw Paul live was Pat Metheny Group.
Well, we'll plan on another one, and then maybe invite people so they can even figure out ahead of time if they have any comments that we didn't get to. I'll be glad to answer questions. That's what
I think we should do that. And I didn't tell you. Maybe I told you the other night. The intention behind doing this and talking with people like yourself is that we could get into drum talk. That's great. I love it. We can get into philosophy. We can get into trains and planes, food, travel. I don't care, because people like to hear about the person they're interested in. There are people who want to know about Paul Wertico. So it's really, and maybe slightly self-indulgent, been trying to talk about history, basically. I mean, you're a very important, integral part of drum history, music history. You teach music history. You have a lot to say. You've done a lot, and there are people who want to know. There's so much stuff you did I didn't know you did, but I'm learning more. And if 30 years from now, if I'm dead and buried yet, somebody comes across this and they're inspired, well, and people are already enjoying it, then the job I wanted to do is done, because you were important to me, and you were important to a lot of people. So
thank you.
You're being very generous with your time, and I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I mean, what else? Like I said, what better thing to do than this? Talk about things that we love.
I love it, man. Yeah. So we can talk too about another one in the future, and maybe organize it in a way where You can take questions in advance or something like that.
That would be probably good. Yeah. You know,
I think so.
And like, you know, another thing, I mean, kind of close out, a lot of times when I do drum clinics, it's funny because there'll be drummers, obviously, but there'll be other like sax players and guitar players and singers that come too, you know, because I'm not going to just talk about, you know, paradiddles and all that stuff, you know, because to me, that's good to, you know, when you're teaching, you have to talk about those things. But again, you know, they aren't separate from what we're talking about. You know, that's the thing. And, you know, I had one student one time that drove up from Fayetteville, Arkansas all the time. And the first lesson, he goes, "Do you mind if I tape it?" I said, "No, that's fine." He goes, "Oh, by the way, you know, I have like all these things that I taped with Elvin Jones and Andrew Cyril and Bob Moses from like 1976. So he gave me these, you know, these, they're incredible. And at one point, you know, Elvin's talking about movies. And then, cool. And at one point, Elvin goes, "Well, man, you know, I know you're paying me for a drum lesson and you might be wondering why I'm talking about movies, but when you're taking a drum lesson with me, you're getting me." Mm-hmm. And I went, wow, that is right on the money, you know?
I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah. Elvin, man, when I discovered him, that was it. I was changed. It was a pivotal point, you know? Especially, I only saw him once, man. And at the end of the gig, I met him. It's the Regatta Bar in Cambridge. You probably played there.
Yeah. Well, you want to hear the first time I heard? This is a magical experience. This is right, I think, before the big 1968 debacle in Grant Park. Okay, the Democrat convention. Drums Unlimited had a drum festival. Okay, so they had, I think there was a band, Huey Lewis and the News. They were like a rock band. Mm-hmm. Joe Crusadis played. He did a drum clinic. Barrett Deems did a drum clinic.
Oh, wow.
Then Joe Morello did a drum clinic.
Oh, so
cool. So first of all, he's playing. At one point, he broke a tom head. So he's sitting there with the left hand going, changes the tom head while maintaining these triplets, tunes the tom back up, plays it, and finishes his solo. So I'm thinking, like, what can you do after this? So then Elvin comes on. Now, by this time, some people had left because it was like an all-day event, and it started raining. So I'm right in front of Elvin, like I'm literally like, you know, 2 feet in front of him. And there's a guy holding an umbrella over Elvin's head as it's raining, and he's playing a drum solo. That's the first time I saw him live. Now imagine what that was like.
Holy cow, yeah. That's cool.
That was just like it was like a spiritual experience, you know?
Well, I felt that way about Elvin, you know, too. Just not even seeing him live, but the one time I did see him live, which actually wasn't that long before he passed away, and you know, the elasticity was there. Elvin was there in full force, and it was a beautiful experience. And at the end of the gig, I mean, the place only holds maybe 150 people, and it was only half full, right? And he's just hanging out, and you know, went up to talk to him. I didn't even know what to say.
Did he shake hands with you?
Oh, it's better than that.
Okay, he had a strong handshake.
Yeah, so he's like, I said, "I don't know what to say, Mr. Jones, but I can say this: thank you for everything.
Beautiful.
You have changed my life, and I'm grateful." Says, man, I don't know. I just play the drums and you know, and my wife Kiko, she don't want me to stand up because my legs are tired, and we'll keep talking. So we only talked for like 2 minutes, but then at the end I got the handshake, but then I got the Elven Hug.
Oh wow, yeah.
Have you had the Elven Hug?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I had heard about the Elven Hug. A couple of people I know who received the Elven Hug. It was the best hug in the world. I mean, it was just this, he hugs tight and he hugs big. And then I went outside and I cried, and I called one of my best friends who was a drummer, and I said, "Elvin just hugged me." It's like,
it's funny.
I had to tell somebody. I got the Elven Hug, and I love him. He's the best, you know. It's great.
It's funny because I can remember a few hugs, you know. I remember hugging Dennis Chambers. and his chest was so big.
Yeah,
It was like, oh my God, you know, I mean, this is when he was really, you know, strong and healthy, you know, a few, you know, years ago. And then I hugged Han Bennick,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was like crushed me. He's like, you know, this strong, I mean, it was unbelievable. Like, you know, because sometimes you hug people, and I don't like, even though I've got a really strong grip, I usually do the kind of the loose grip, because when I was in high school, my band director, who I'd mentioned, would take us to see, you know, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Woody Herman, and these guys would sit with us like on their break. So I'm sitting next to Duke Ellington, but I got a chance to shake hands with like Rufus Speedy Jones and John Van Olen, and they all kind of gave the dead fish. Now I'm in high school, I'm thinking, what is this? But I started realizing that, you know, our hands are, that's our life. So, you know, these people that crush your hand, it's like, why are you doing that to me, man? You know, I don't need to prove how strong I am. You know what I'm saying? It's really funny. You do remember certain people and the way they approach different things in life. Interesting. But Elvin was definitely one of them.
Yeah, he was a hugger and a handshaker.
Yeah.
Buddy Rich had big hands. I actually got to meet him many times. He was always really friendly. Really
yeah. I played before him and stuff, you know, opposite him and things. Yeah.
And yeah, his hands would like dwarf my hands. It's funny, I'm 6'2", but I don't have very big hands. So yeah, Michael has a comment here. It says,
okay.
It's all right. Oh, he has a story about Lyle Mays jumping into his arms after an 89 gig with Pat in Montreal.
Really?
Hey, that's a good story, man.
That is. You have to interview Mike.
Yeah, you know what, Mike, we got to talk. We got to talk anyways. Well, listen, I do have to go now. I don't want to, but we're going to do it again, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks. Thank you, everybody that's out there. I hope you enjoyed it.
I had a blast myself, and we've had some nice comments here. So I appreciate everyone joining me. Paul, man, respect, love, and you're awesome, man. Thank you for everything.
Right back at you. So talk to you soon.
My friend. Stay safe, my friend. All right. We'll be in touch soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.